Welcome to Mom and Mind. I'm your host, Dr. Kat. And on this episode, we have a unique experience for the podcast where I have 4 guests on, and they are all talking about their journey through losing their uterus to survive childbirth and the curse that it can leave behind. I'm joined by Katie Rush, Britt Gregory, Greta Reimold, and Kelsey Johns. They are 4 women who connected over the struggle to rebuild their life, having constant dismissal from healthcare professionals, and finding the one missing ingredient to get them back to normal. And they found that the one missing ingredient to get back to normal still isn't normalized in today's medical society, which for them was hormone replacement therapy. Which for them and a lot of people is hormone replacement therapy. Each of them gives us a little bit of insight into their journey, how difficult it was, how not enough people really talk about this nor understand how to support people through this. And they talk about figuring out ways to rebuild their life after losing an organ, losing their uterus, and then experiencing deep trauma and deep grief. I'm really grateful to all 4 of them for coming on to share their story, and I'm glad you're here to listen as well. So let's meet. Katie, Britt, Greta, and Kelsey. Welcome, ladies. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Absolutely. I'm excited to have all 4 of you on. It's rare that we get to have a big group discussion. And I'd first love to understand and know how you guys all came together.
So we actually came together on a Facebook group that was created for other women who lost their uteruses during childbirth. And majority of the women had placenta accreta or increta, something along those lines.
Wow. Okay. So first, great that existed or exists for you guys to have found each other. I assume that when you go through something like this, you're not quite sure where to turn or who to talk to find somebody else who understands what this is like. Is that accurate?
Very.
Really complex because there's a big trauma piece to it all, which is really all encompassing. But then there's the fallout of your body and your hormones and your brain, and you just wonder if you're losing your mind or if you're even going to live beyond a few months. I think a lot of women in there feel like that.
Because the significance of trauma, but also I can't imagine anyone's, telling you, hey, this might happen while you're going through this. Not right. It's not a discussion people are really having beforehand. So this is like after you go through something like this, or maybe during the process of going through something like it, your whole world just changes in that moment. Is that what it feels like?
Literally flipped up. Yeah.
Yeah, it really feels like, at least for me, I was at the bottom of a well and there was no light and there was nowhere to get footing. And I was just stuck there and I couldn't get out. So it was really just flipping your world upside down and beyond.
And for each of you, if you could, I guess it's hard to encapsulate this whole experience into, a conversation today, but could you give kind of a snapshot of like when you found out that this was going to be happening, that you would be having a hysterectomy?
So, Kelsey,
go ahead, Katie.
Okay. Kelsey and I actually found out in the weeks ahead of our delivery. We had been diagnosed, Kelsey, with placenta accreta, and I had the most advanced form of an accreta, which is called a percreta. So what that means is that your placenta has attached too deeply into the lining of your uterus. For me, mine had gone completely through my uterus and it had found my bladder to be a happy blood source of all things. And so we received the news pretty early on, hey, you have something pretty high risk going on here. And we need to send you over to get some pretty detailed imaging to just confirm. And so I don't know, Kelsey, for you exactly what week that was, but for me, that conversation was started at week 28 of pregnancy. And I got confirmation at around week 30. And so I sat with that news for about 5 weeks that you have this deadly pregnancy condition. And the only way that you are going to survive is to have blood transfusions, because you're going to lose a ton of blood and you are going to have a life-saving hysterectomy during the arrival of your daughter. And it's going to be by C-section. You don't have a say in any of this.
Oh, wow.
So 5 weeks before delivery, I sat with that news. And I know, Kelsey, for you, it was probably around the similar timelines.
Yeah.
What was your experience, Kelsey?
Same, a lot like Katie's. I was told around 20 weeks that I had placenta previa and not to worry, but we'll just keep an eye on for a condition called placenta accreta. And I've had multiple scans, and it wasn't until week 32 I was transferred to a university hospital, and they were able to see that right away. And since I was already in the hospital the week prior having contractions, they were like, you could not go into labor, you know, away from home, away from a hospital that's able to deal with this. So I immediately had to get my stuff and everything together to go have the hysterectomy. So
Wow.
it was about, I found out at 32 weeks confirmed and delivered at 33, the same vertical cesarean hysterectomy.
Can you pause for a second and describe a vertical C-section hysterectomy for people who don't understand the difference?
So for me, and I know it's the same for a lot of girls, instead of horizontally cut from your pelvic, I was cut from my low pelvic bone up above like 2.5 inches over your belly button. So it's not a very fun looking. The scar goes up above your belly button and then you're just stitched back together, and it definitely was. I had a classical C-section and the vertical was way worse.
Thank you for explaining that. I mean, there are so many parts of this so far that would potentially be traumatizing, if not for sure traumatizing for people, let alone, you know, finding out that you're going to have a scar, physical scar to live with, along with the emotional just depth of difficulty that is. Thanks for explaining it.
For
And
sure.
to add on to what how Kelsey described the vertical scar, they do that so that they have good visibility when they go in, because your uterus is so large and vascular that they want to be able to see everything very clearly in removing a baby, one, and then also to remove that organ and any of the placenta. So both of us had gynecology oncologists in our surgery, along with, I had over 27 medical professionals in the main OR of the biggest hospital in the state of Colorado. So there's a lot of working pieces and they need to be able to see, which is why they cut you the way that they do.
Right. Okay. Thank you. And definitely, like I said before, it's the depth of your experience. We're just getting snapshots today, because I know you guys want to help people understand that this is something that happens, and for anybody out there who's gone through this to know that they're not alone. So it feels hard to not like do a little bit of disservice to the depth of your stories and your experience in a certain way, because I know there's so much we're not going to be able to touch on. And for you, Greta, what was your experience?
No, I had a little bit of a different experience because I didn't have percreta or accreta or increta part of the spectrum. I had a healthy pregnancy. Everything looked great. I just couldn't progress my daughter during labor. So I pushed for close to 3 hours, maybe a little bit over 3 hours. And it came down to a C-section. It was a weekend and a skeleton crew at the hospital. They just didn't really have the resources that they normally have on this particular evening. So a young resident did most of the work on my C-section. She cut into an artery on accident, didn't catch it, and then closed me back up. And I went to recovery, and that's basically where I bled to death, was in the recovery area. And they wheeled me back to the OR as fast as they could. They called a code blue, and they had a team work on me. Over the course of 4 hours, I was still conscious, but I slowly felt myself dying. And at the end of the 4 hours, I felt that I had passed away. My soul had left my body. At the end of everything that was said and done, I know I lost my full blood volume about 3 times in a row.
Wow.
And they, 4 or 5 hours later, they called in a really highly skilled gynecology oncology team. They had told my husband they tried everything. They really didn't have a lot of hope that I would make it through the night, but they would give it one last shot to try to do the hysterectomy, but that I would probably likely die during the surgery.
Wow.
So they ended up removing my uterus, my right ovary, my tubes, and my cervix. So my story was a little bit different in the fact that it was an accident that happened versus something else. But it parallels Brittany in some ways, because Brittany also experienced kind of bleeding out to death without warning signs.
Okay. 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 Thanks. Well, I'm going to come back to that in a moment. After we get also the snapshot of Brittany's story, I have more questions.
Okay, so yeah, for me, I had what seemed like a very healthy pregnancy, and I actually delivered vaginally. Mine was a vaginal delivery, and my Creta was undiagnosed.
Oh.
And so I went home postpartum, and I think it was a week to the day that I had delivered. I stood up, I was breastfeeding my daughter, and I stood up and I just completely hemorrhaged. And I mean, it just was gulping out of me and was rushed to the hospital. Kind of a crazy scene at the hospital. And they came in and told me that they had missed that my placenta had grown through my uterus and they had to remove it to save my life, because I lost 12 liters of blood at the hospital. So after I'd hemorrhaged in my living room.
Okay. And then the kind of near death experience for you also?
Yes, but oddly enough, I was very calm. I don't know if I had just lost so much blood, I was in shock, but I was just so calm during the entire situation.
Okay. Right. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that could be going on. Shock for sure
Absolutely
would be in there. Right. So these are all very unexpected, intense, traumatizing situations. How, I guess after you finally get stabilized, there's still a baby, and they're still trying to figure out how to, like, how is any of this gonna happen? I mean, you're after you lose that amount of blood, like, lots of things don't function as you'd like them to. Like, for instance, breastfeeding can be very hard after something like that. So again, for all of you, how do you move on from that? How do you, like, do the next steps after you kind of come to and understand, or maybe not even understand, what just happened?
I will say that out of us girls, I was the only one that didn't have a massive blood loss. And I can accredit the team. Of course, my surgery was pre-planned. And there was 36 surgeons and nurses in the OR waiting when I walked in. Very fortunate myself for that, because I didn't have that blood loss like the girls did. but it was also just very nerve-wracking going into the surgery and what could come.
Mhm.
Will I survive?
Mhm.
And how they explain what's going to happen in the procedure, pumping you in a balloon and putting you just hooking you up to revive you, it's a for blood, and just it's a whole process. And for me, I remember waking up in the OR and I was having a hard time breathing, and I was so worried about my son, but I didn't even get to meet him till the next day.
Mhm.
So I think there's just so many emotions, just I don't even know how to even really put, there's just so much emotions, but yet I'm cut wide open and I'm trying to breastfeed and haven't met my son, and I'm just had a full pregnancy and there's just no baby yet. I haven't seen, and there's a lot of emotion with that. But
Mhm.
as far as the blood loss, I did not have that. So that would be questions for these ladies.
Sure. But still a lot of questions about how to move forward. How is this going to work?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Even like how to hold your baby.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like very literally, because
Yeah,
there's like pain and yeah.
Yeah. Navigating something like a traumatic delivery that each of us experience in our own ways is really hard because no one has written a survival guide for something like this.
Mhm.
And so I think in a lot of ways, we clung to each other. For me, in those immediate moments after my surgery, it was family and friends who dropped everything in their lives to show up. I mean, I can't tell you how many casseroles we had waiting on the front porch.
That's great.
And people texting, calling, praying. My sister flew in across the country to be a bedside nurse and to make sure that I was advocated for in any way that I needed.
Mhm.
And, obviously, I relied on NICU nurses to take care of my daughter because I was so weak from blood loss. I
Mhm.
actually did not meet her until 48 hours after the fact. And
Mhm.
when I did meet her, I said to my husband, I can't even pick her up because my hands were so weak. It was just so difficult. And so those immediate moments and immediate days, you are truly relying on everyone around you
Mhm.
in the hospital and then outside of the hospital, family and friends to come alongside you. But as you emerge from that setting and you go home, there's this kind of panic that sets in that you're like, oh my gosh, what just happened? And I need to connect with people that understand this. And I think that kind of forged a relationship with each other. We all found this Facebook group that is specific to women who have had hysterectomies to survive childbirth. And I think that we kind of found each other through that Facebook group.
Mhm.
And so that was another layer to coming out of this trauma, was not just finding support from our in-network people, but also connecting with other survivors. And I think that all of us feel like that was a really crucial piece to coming out on the other side.
Yeah, definitely.
Would like to add too that on top of what Katie was saying, the time that I was discharged, I was told that my life would be normal. And I was in a really dire state. I had lost so much blood. My body was bloated up. My hand and my feet looked like Michelin Man from taking in so many blood products. I was white as a ghost. And I kind of was in like a corpse type situation for 3 months after, really in bed, too weak to do anything, couldn't really feed myself, was super confused all the time. I couldn't even remember the names of the roads around here. When I would be navigating myself through the kitchen, I would just forget where I had placed anything in my past lifetime. I think my family grappled even with the fact that I could be maybe mentally handicapped or disabled to some extent. And so there was just so much grief that came with that, but also the fallout with the hospital. Why did they just let me go home like that? Why didn't they give me more information about what was to be expected? And I think that this is a consistency that all of us have in this group, is that we were just kind of told, go home, your life will be normal, everything will be fine. And it was actually just everything except normal.
Mhm. Right. I mean, I can't imagine the amount of support you would actually need to get back to feeling whatever as good as possible given what you've just been through. Well, for sure, like the help and support from families, but like medical help when you're recovered enough to have like physical therapy, to have like any of those things that could support you. It doesn't sound like those things came through for you guys. No.
We had to go searching for them.
Oh, right, right. What about for you, Brittany?
For me, everything that I went through mentally, the loss of my hormones was actually far worse than the loss of my uterus, which obviously that's where it stemmed from. But that part was very, very difficult for me. And sadly, I didn't want anything to do with my daughter or anybody in my household.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I was just a complete shell of myself and trying to find anybody to listen to what's going on with you and being told that here you need an antidepressant because you still have your ovaries and you're fine. It was very, very frustrating.
Wow. So, I mean, amongst all of this, it doesn't sound like you guys were listened to or like really heard. Being told you're going to be fine after something like this feels to me like at minimum a slap in the face.
Very much so.
How can you tell somebody that everything's going to be back to normal, whatever that means? Like, what is normal anymore?
Yeah, one of my doctors even told me that anxiety and hypochondriac go side by side.
Whoa.
And
Yeah.
that,
Oh my God.
you know, I should give these antidepressants a try. And
like insinuating that you're doing too much, like that you're you're worried for nothing or
yeah, because it was over a year and I just hadn't felt like myself. I'm having just a whole array of symptoms. And this is kind of where Brittany kind of brought us together because she's in the group advocating because someone advocated for her, like, hey, you're not crazy, get your hormones checked out. You got your ovaries, but they may not be working. And that's why we're here together because that was true for all of us. So,
okay, so it is nobody. Oh, I have so many questions about follow-up care. Is nobody checking these things for you guys? Nobody's like, hey, you might notice these differences in your hormones, or you might feel, or at least enough of that. You're not getting enough of that kind of support.
I actually transferred my care after my delivery because it was so triggering to go back to the OBGYN's office that caught my placenta precreta that I was like, I can't go back there. And so I transferred my care to a different OBGYN who 2 women in my life highly recommended. And they actually pulled some strings to get me in to see her. And she moved mountains just to meet with me when she could, to say, listen, I am your person now. We're going to check these things. However, I was breastfeeding for the first 9 months. And so she didn't want to check hormone levels, even though my main concern was my hormones. I had these weird symptoms within the first 3 months start to pop up. And I kept saying, something's wrong. I'm not growing body hair anymore. My eyebrows are like not very full. I'm fatigued all the time. I had rapid weight gain in the span of 6 months. I mean, it was crazy when you looked at my medical chart from my PCP's office. And so I would bring these concerns to her, but she didn't want to check my hormones. And her whole reasoning was, you are breastfeeding. So until you're done breastfeeding, we've got to give your body time to recalibrate. And then I will check them. All the while, I had every symptom of hormone deficiency show up in my body. Physically, you could see it. I had vaginal atrophy. I had wrinkles places I didn't even know could wrinkle. I also felt like my skin would easily break open and there was this bruising, and then I would just have wounds that wouldn't heal. And, you know, on top of that, down below my pelvic floor was a complete disaster. I had urinary incontinence, which is a classic symptom of menopause. And so I had all these things start to creep in, and I was like, something's wrong. But she just kept saying, we have to wait until you're done breastfeeding.
So for
yeah.
all of you, what were some of your signs, and looking back on it now, maybe that hormones were really disrupted?
For me, it was about 6 months postpartum. And I don't think that doctors or even many women realize the magnitude of the hormone deficiency and how it affects you. For me, I couldn't really even focus on the trauma that I had endured during childbirth because I had such an array of symptoms. I mean, I thought I had MS. I was losing my mind mentally. I had never contemplated suicide in my life. And that was at the forefront for me in my mind. And as far as, you know, you go to all these doctor's appointments and they're like, you know, you're okay, you're fine. And hormones, my OB actually told me hormones don't cause these types of symptoms. And they just, I truly believe that they don't understand that. Yeah.
Wow. Oh, wow. Okay. Anything else for you, Greta or Kelsey, that were like really strong symptoms of your hormones being off?
Yeah, kind of like Brittany, I had some not so normal symptoms. I had some tingling in my scalp. I had like tingling in one of my legs. I had, you know, common one was night sweats, depression. I have panic. I was just so full of anxiety. Like when I think everybody experiences a little bit of anxiety, but it was just such a heightened anxiety every part about my day. Just so many things. My hair was breaking off. Just my skin hurt. The list is literally
Right.
never ending. So,
Right. And any others for you, Greta?
Yeah, I just had zero emotion. Like if there was something fantastic that happened, I couldn't even produce any emotion. I was just emotionless. I had really significant derealization, which I know Brittany had as well, which is where you feel like you're watching your life as a dream, or maybe you're watching yourself from an exterior point of view. My environment became abstract, sounds became really abstract. I would lose grip on things like plates and cups because I had weakness in my hands that would come and go. I would try to wash my hair in the shower, and my hands would just get so weak I couldn't continue washing my hair. And then it would come back. So then it was like I was able to tingling all over, vibrations, motion sickness. Like I guess I would reiterate, the list was so long. It was like hundreds of symptoms. And I too sadly became consumed with suicidal ideation because I just thought that if I have to live the rest of my life like this, I just can't do it.
Right. This all sounds torturous.
Yeah.
So it would be, I think, nearly impossible to separate out, okay, like what's hormones, what's depression, what's trauma, what's this, what's like, it's all everything all the time, all at once. And I assume, and maybe what I heard Kelsey saying, a part of it anyways, is that people are, or maybe providers are attributing this to just depression or just what one thing, like oversimplifying what could be happening. But really, you guys needed all kinds of support, I assume, like the best professionals to help you with hormones, to help you understand what's going on with your body, physical therapists, because right at this point, I would assume, sitting from where I sit as a psychologist, it would be wild to me if there was no PTSD, if there was no like significant trauma at the bare minimum. Was anybody talking to you about the impact of this on your mental health in a real way without being like, dismissive?
Yeah, I mean, it came up pretty early on my first consult with the OB/GYN that I transferred my care to was a virtual one. And she flat out said to me, what you just endured is life altering, deeply traumatic. I want you to maybe consider, not saying for the long term, but just to get you through now, antidepressants. And and that was fair, right? That was fair for her to say that. She also really wanted me to meet with a therapist. So early on, that was a conversation for me, at least.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else get that kind of insight or support?
From the hospital before I left that I should engage with a psychologist at some point, but it would have been nice actually if somebody just would have made me an appointment because I couldn't really help myself during that time. One thing though that I want to say about that is with the PTSD and the significant trauma, I know one of the discussions we've had amongst us four women is that it was so hard to move past that without the hormones. Because without the hormones, you just don't have a personality, you don't have reasoning, you're not connected to yourself at all. So I think it was just so vital that somebody addressed hormones with us before we could even start to grapple with some of the psychological symptoms.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. A lot of sense because until you have like baseline functioning back in place, like your body is working kind of a little bit like how it's supposed to or how you'd expect it to, it is really hard to get into those other like topics of how to cope because you can't make yourself cope through a hormonal deficiency. You there's no way to do that. I mean, yes, there's like all the breathing techniques in the world are not going to help your hormones regulate themselves to the extent that you guys needed them to. So for each of you, I mean, there's so much we don't know about your story still, and I assume to some extent there's some part of you that even though maybe you're for the most part better or okay now, that there are parts of this experience that might still pop up from time to time, if not a lot, because life, but what would you like to make sure, like people hearing your story, people who've been through this, what would you like them to know?
I'll go. I would love for women to know that they are not crazy. That is the big thing for me. And to advocate for yourself if you have gone through this and pursue hormone testing just to even see where you're at and advocate for yourself to get hormones if you are deficient.
Right. Thank you.
And I can add that, along with going to the doctors and getting tested for hormones, definitely therapy, talk therapy, EMDR therapy. So I think there's lots of support out there. And I think we are joined together, us four ladies, because we're constantly trying to just make sure that, we know other women, they're not crazy, that we can help them, we can support them, and try to help them out of this darkness.
Right. Thank you.
I want to encourage people listening to this to know that it is possible to move forward in life after going through something deeply traumatic. And you're carrying a grief every day, to be honest. It's grief on many levels, but it's possible to move forward. And I think for all of us, it's taken a multidisciplinary approach to get to this point. It's taken a community of people who understand us and love us, even when things aren't going super well, and they're going to stand by us and care for our families. Also, physicians who are listening and want to serve you in the best ways they can. So if they don't know the answer to something, they're going to be open-minded and try and find the answer with you. And I think finally, it's about like advocating for yourself. So, for me, that looked like I had to go through EMDR therapy, and I've been in it for a long, long time.
Mhm.
But also, I've had to switch doctors a couple times when I have felt that I have not been heard.
Mhm.
And I can honestly say, if you were to tell me I am who I am right now in the first week postpartum, I would not believe you. But it's possible to get there. It just takes a lot of work and a lot of advocating for yourself, but you can do it.
Thank you.
Well said from everyone here. I would say I'd like to send a warning signal to our care teams and providers. Wake up. You saved our lives, but you didn't come through. You almost lost some of us in the postpartum, and you are losing women
Mm.
every day because they're not living through the aftermath of this situation. And why is it that we are so advanced as a Western country, but yet we cannot get our providers up to speed with all the technology and all the resources and all the algorithms that are out there? Why did all of us get left behind? Why can't we do better? I think this is the most important thing I have to say, because we can't keep failing women in this way. We just can't.
Yeah, agreed. And I want to deeply thank each and every one of you for sharing this bit of your story with us today. And I know by you sharing it and the resource that you provide for other people, other women, it is going to help other people, and for sure, hopefully also the providers. And I'm so glad you all are here, like that you did make it. And I appreciate how much work it took for you to get to where you are now. And I'm just in awe of your strength and your courage. And, I know it's probably still hard at times, but it speaks volumes to what you have within you inherently to keep going. So thank you for being here.
Thank you for
Thank
having
you.
us.
Thank you
Yeah,
for having
thank
us.
you for that.
Words.
Thank you, ladies, for coming on to share your story. This is super helpful and definitely not an often enough discussed topic. If you guys would like to get connected with them, you can go to Instagram or Facebook to Hysterectomy Hormone Helpers, or on TikTok at Hysterectomy BHRT Helpers. Certainly, if you know of anybody who's gone through something like this, please send this episode along. People need this kind of a resource and definitely need to know that they're not alone in this. And these types of supports, these types of groups that people get together and talk about the realities of how it's impacting them and how to get better and how to feel better is so important. And if you haven't yet joined me over on YouTube, go find Mom in Mind and you can watch our interview there as well. And I'd love to invite you to subscribe to the Mom in Mind channel while you're there. Once again, thank you so much for being with us. Until next time.